Welcome to another in the series of Legends tapes. The Legends program is a project of the American Academy for Park and Recreation Administration. The tapes are interviews with people who have been leaders in parks and recreation throughout the United States and serve the purpose of having a library available to colleges and universities for use in classes where young people can view these tapes and get an idea of what it's like to work in the leisure studies area and just basically what it takes to someday become a leader in parks and recreation, as these folks in these taped interviews have done. My name is John Potts. I'm Executive Director of the Champaign County Forest Preserve District in Champaign County, Illinois. And with me this morning is Dr. Bill McKinney, who is the head of the Leisure Studies Department at the University of Illinois. And we will be interviewing Mick Pope. And Mick, you've recently retired. Would you tell us what it is that you retired from?
Be glad to, John. After 32 years, actually I think about 33 years in the field as an active professional, I, at age 56, decided that I had had enough and left the job that I had been in with the Elmhurst Park District in the Chicago suburban area for the prior 22 years. Decided that at this point in my career I would go into semi-retirement. So rather than just sit around and do nothing, I decided that it would be a good idea to try to keep in contact with my profession. It has and still does mean a good deal to me. So I've been in the consulting business, knowledge broker if you will, trying to put those 30-some years to practice helping other agencies around the country, and it's been quite interesting and also educational for me, I might add.
It seems like all of this is educational. Why don't we talk a little bit about why you decided to get into this profession in the beginning and how it was you went about getting into it?
Well, I guess you have to scratch your head and go back some 30 years. As a young student, I grew up in the east central Illinois area. This is being taped in on the campus at the University of Illinois. My hometown, Paris, Illinois, is just a few miles from here. And when I enrolled out of high school and enrolled at the university, I actually was in liberal arts and science. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my future. Not an uncommon problem for most graduating high school students. Long story short, I decided that perhaps physical education was a curriculum and a profession that I wanted to pursue. And after being in that for one semester, I decided that it really wasn't my forte. Fraternity brother advised me that there was a rather new curriculum on campus, and that was the Parks and Recreation curriculum. I had a strong background in the out of doors, and I decided on a whim, if you will, one day to make an appointment. I did so with the head of the department at that time, Bill, and his name was Al Sapora. Nobody called him Al Sapora. It was always, as you know, Dr. Sapora. I was fortunate to be able to go over and have a 15-minute interview that lasted 2.5 hours. And upon exiting that interview and discussion about the young, if you will, profession, I asked if I might be able to transfer. And so starting, I guess it was my sophomore year, I believe, I transferred into the Parks and Recreation Administration, as it was called in those days. And I wanted really to go into the park side of things more than the recreation side. So that's how I got started, and 4 years later I got my degree and moved on from there.
Actually, during the time that you came into the field, it hadn't been very many years prior to that anybody that came into the recreation side would basically came through physical education. The kind of opportunities didn't exist that you were able to take here at the University of Illinois. Is that correct?
And also, John, I think there were better than two job openings for each graduate in those days. This is back in the early 60s. And it took me a while to find that first job, I might say, because I had military obligation, which was rather common back in the early 60s. Draft conscription was still the rule of the day. And so I went into the National Guard and finished 6 months of active duty, and then 5.5 years after that. But upon exiting the military service, where did I go? I called up the University of Illinois and said, hey, I'm eligible now for a job. I have a wife, she's pregnant, I have a degree, my military is somewhat satisfied. How do I get into the field? So from that, I was advised that I should go to the National Congress, National Recreation Association in those days, forerunner to the National Recreation and Park Association, of course. And fortunately, it was in St. Louis. It happened to be where my wife was from. So we stayed at Aunt Jane's house, and I went to the Congress for 5 days. I spent 5 days in one room at the Congress. Didn't go to one session, didn't go to the exhibit hall, didn't go anywhere but the job interview room, and took a lot of examinations, had a lot of interviews. As a result, I wound up in Topeka, Kansas as my first job with the Topeka Recreation Commission, and I spent 4 terrific years there learning a lot about the profession that I had studied about but had very little practical experience in. And the staff there was young, dynamic, headed up by a newcomer from the New Jersey area by the name of Joe Bannon. And we had my job there was sports, athletics, and aquatics for the entire community of about 130,000 population. And I cut my teeth and learned an awful lot, and would have been happy to stay in the Kansas area, quite frankly. But I had to make a decision whether I wanted to be a small frog in a big pond or a bigger frog in a smaller pond, and opted for the latter. Came back to my home state of Illinois on the south side of the Chicago metropolitan area. And if one new job isn't enough of a challenge, John, I went to work for 2 communities at once, the Homewood Park District and the Flossmoor Park District. I was 27 years of age, new director. I worked for 2 boards at one time, which is certainly a challenge, because when you get things ironed out with Board A, you then bounced over and tried to convince Board B, and they'd say, no, go back and let's do it the other way. So it was a ping-pong match for a year. And then those 2 agencies were legally merged into what is now the Homewood Flossmoor Park District. And I spent 5 years there, and that was really a growth opportunity and learning experience. So I did everything from make ice to lead programs. I was my own secretary for a while, and a few years later we had acquired a lot of property, instituted a lot of programs, and built some nice facilities that are still there and doing quite well.
You know, students are always interested in how do you get that transition from the first professional job where, you know, is always a big learning experience, but how do you then get hired as a director, even if it's a small agency? What do you think the key things that you needed to know to get that job, the qualities that you had to have to get hired into a job like that?
Well, first of all, you have to have the proper foundation educationally. And I was very fortunate going to the University of Illinois, getting an undergraduate degree in the Parks and Recreation area meant quite a bit throughout the country, and it still does. So first, the good foundation, and then choosing the first job, no matter what entry-level position it is. I think that's the most critical job one will ever have. For this reason, you are a neophyte, you're a learner. You are a contributor, but you're basically a learner. You will do yourself well if you will try to decide upon that first job with a boss, if you will, or a set of bosses that believes in mentoring and believes in the continuing education process. Because yes, you come in with a degree, perhaps 1 or 2 years of experience, but you still have to prove yourself. The main thing is that you get into a good learning environment, a good professional environment in which you can learn proper administrative techniques, learn the role of your job, if you will, and learn the role of the profession. That's the most important thing. Then it's the application of that knowledge and your own personality and your skills as a risk taker to try new and inventive things. And once those are in place, you also need to be building your professional network, because networking, professional networking, is by far one of the easier roads to making your own career progress.
And we're fortunate here in Illinois that we've got a highly organized Illinois Association
Absolutely.
of Park Districts and Illinois Park and Recreation Association. So it's ready-made for young people to network. One of the things that I noticed when you were laying out the various things that I've found is that concentration on doing one's current job well seems to have a lot to do with the promotability then of that person. That people who are concentrating on the next job rather than their current job tend to fall by the wayside after a few job changes. And
Well,
I think
true.
we find in successful administrators that one of their characteristics is that at each level that they worked, they were very good at what they were doing. So,
Well, you do have to be a good practitioner. You have to pay attention to the basics and the job responsibilities for which you were hired. I can't stress enough the importance. While some states may have a very effective professional organization, certainly Illinois, Michigan, the list goes on naturally, but the fact of the matter is those are there.
mhm.
But what are you going to do to apply yourself to become involved with that? Naturally, your boss has to be professionally attuned to say, yes, you should join the organizations and you should be an active and contributing member. That's the best way to make a commitment, is to say, I'll join committees, I'll become involved. And when the leadership opportunities offer themselves, don't be bashful. If you have something to give, you're genuinely interested in your profession and in the amalgamation of bringing the concepts of your knowledge and your experience together, that with your networking, I think, will do you well and will sell you and yourself as long as you produce a quality product. And that's why you're hired to begin with.
So after Homewood Flossmoor,
Well, after 5 growth years in Homewood Flossmoor, an opportunity came about, and I was called one evening. It was about 11 o'clock at night, as I recall. My wife and I were watching the Johnny Carson show, and the phone rang. Anything after 9:30 when the phone rings is generally raises the hair on the back of my neck. It was a board member from the Elmhurst Park District who said, gee, we're sitting at a board meeting at 11 o'clock at night and talking about changes, and we think that we would be having an opening pretty soon, and would you be interested in applying? That led to some interviews and a long process of competing, if you will, for that job. And in 1973, I took the job as the executive director of the Elmhurst Park District. It's on the west suburban side of the Chicago area. Homewood Flossmoor is maybe 20 miles away, so I didn't have to move far. But it was about twice the size of the agency that I was leaving, and had just passed a $4.5 million bond issue, and many of those things enticed me. So I'm known as a detailed person who can come in and get things organized, and they needed somebody in that with those qualifications. So during that last 22-year period, a lot of things happened, of course. Terrific staff opportunities, working with new staff members, acting as a mentor to staff members is always important, because in my first job, within the first week, my boss told me, I'm here to help you. You're here to do the job, but I'm here to help you. And whenever you decide that it's time for you to leave, let me know and I'll help you find a place. That made a very big impression upon me, and I've tried to bring that philosophy, if you will, to the staff members that I've been responsible for over the years. So Elmhurst was an exciting opportunity for me for many years. A lot of building activity went on, had a chance to become quite involved with my state organization and also the national organization, the National Recreation and Park Association, during that period of time. And it was quite profitable for me. I learned a lot. I met a lot of terrific practitioners throughout the country, and I feel very fortunate to have done that.
Why don't you describe a little bit about what you found when you got there and what you left when you left, because that was a big growth area, and there were tremendous changes in there, weren't there?
Yes, John, there were. The community is a bedroom community for Chicago. It has a population base that has been pretty stable over the past 20 or so years because it's landlocked. Suburbs are touching on all sides. Population about 45,000, and an upper middle class community from that standpoint. Very demanding in their wants and desires. The Park District offered quite a bit of recreation opportunities and some good facilities in those days, but the $4.5 million bond issue really changed the face of the community as far as the public Parks and Recreation Department were concerned. We got into quite a bit of building. One of the aspects was a joint venture with another community to build a 9-hole golf course. When you're buying land for a golf course, many of the people viewing this will say, well, the wide open spaces in the suburban area, you bought backyards and paid dearly for them. So we put together about 70 acres and put a 9-hole executive golf course in. Within 18 months, it had surpassed 10-year projections as far as usage was concerned. Another thing that was one of the firsts in the country, I think, was we had an indoor tennis facility that we expanded. It had plateaued in usage and in serviceability, and we expanded that facility into a health club. And I made a cold call to the hospital one day and said, would you be interested in coming in as a corporate partner into this new facility, explained the basic concepts. They almost came through the phone with enthusiasm. So we formed a corporate partnership, and they used about 5,000 square feet. We added about 50,000 square feet to the building and took it from about a $450,000 operation per year to well over $2.5 million within about a year and a half. 6,000 members in the community used it. It really was gratifying to see the response that the community gave to this facility. I could go on. The recreation programs doubled. In 1992, I believe it was, the Elmhurst Park District received the National Gold Medal for Excellence in Administration and Management. I'm very proud of that. I wear the lapel pin today because it's emblematic, I think, of an awful lot of hard work, dedicated staff, terrific board, and a great community that all melds together with volunteers to make a community very vibrant and active in the leisure movement.
Bill, I don't want to just take over this whole
thing. Mick highlighted a couple of things during his career, and because we're doing this for classroom use and for students, I wanted to go back to that first experience, that first job experience in Topeka, and say, if you were to advise students about what would be the key elements of the job that they should concentrate on, that they should learn about, what were your major challenges in that first position that you had that students may also have, regardless of the agency they work on, could you highlight those?
Sure. Reflecting back, Bill, I would say that you really, a person who is looking for any job needs to do his or her homework. I always use the opportunity for interviews as an opportunity to do some research. You need to find out the reputation of the agency. You need to find out the reputation of your boss or bosses, if you will, what they have to offer, what their professional obligations and philosophy would be. And the opportunity then presents itself as to what exactly will I be doing? What would be the job description? What is, certainly you can receive a piece of paper that has things annotated on it. This is the job description of this position. But you need to do a little bit more homework than that. If there is an incumbent in that job or who has just left, contact them, find out obviously the pluses and minuses of the job itself, of the agency, of the boss, if you can find that out, and do your homework. There's no substitute for that. If you're buying a stock, if you're buying an automobile, if you're buying a house, if you're choosing a partner, all of those things need some research naturally, different degrees.
When you got into that first job, were there elements that you felt that you really didn't have the educational background to handle and that you felt like these are areas I need to concentrate on and develop before I can become a really good professional?
Well, first of all, that very first job is one that's very difficult because you're coming from basically the womb. You've been in the home, you've had your feet under your parents' table for many years. If you've cut that cord and you've been on to the university and you say you're ready to conquer the world then, there's nothing like that first job, especially if it's out of the environment that you're comfortable with. I moved from the cornfields of Illinois to the prairies of Kansas. I grew up in a small town of 7,000 people. I was now in a community of 140,000. Lots of interesting things. But certainly when you walk into the job, I can reflect upon the first few months. I wondered how much I had slept in class because many of the things that I was thrown into, I had a passing, or you ought to read this, or you ought to do this paper on that subject. But this is for real, and your performance is graded upon how well you do. That's entirely different and rather sobering when you get to that job because there's a smattering of education. Education is basically a process of trying to learn how to solve problems. Are you a good problem solver? If you can meet challenges and be creative in solving problems, you're not going to have all the knowledge. Nobody does. I don't care how long they've worked. But you need to be able to go to some sources and gather information. So you're a resource gatherer. How well you put the resources together, how well you package it, offer alternatives, do your homework, and be prepared when questions are asked about a project or a proposal that you're making. That's the hallmark of somebody who can cut the mustard, if you will.
Yeah. If you think about the professional's position, he may have or she may have responsibilities in finance, in relationship with staff and personnel, in relationship with participants and programming and designing programs, relationship with facility and facility management, relationships with boards or bosses. Were any of those a particular challenge to you at that first position, or any of you felt ill-equipped to, or that you...
Yes. Certainly the area of finance is one that when you're in class, when you're not on the job, they say, here's the budgeting principles and so on. I teach a course in budgeting now at the Revenue Sources School. It's now called the Business Institute for Park and Recreation Professionals at Oglebay, West Virginia. It's a National Recreation and Park Association school. And I teach 4 courses there. One of them is budgeting. But I'll never forget coming in the first year, and I walked in November to that job, and the budget had to be put on the table, I think, in February or March. And I had to prepare the budget. I had 6 community swimming pools. I had the full retinue of sporting activities. There was probably a budget of $300,000-400,000, which was a lot of money in those days. Mm-hmm. The last job I left, it was about $12 million. So you're thrown into the cauldron pretty quickly. I found the budgeting area to be the most challenging. Programming techniques, things that you learned in school, came back to you, and that was the staple of your job. Management of personnel is always very difficult. Naturally, I always said the hardest part of the job that I had was not working with the board or putting out a good product. It was managing people. So after the numbers process became just that, a process where you embellished upon the background work, the homework that you had to do to get the material together. Dealing with people on an everyday basis it's really a marriage. You deal with a park board or a higher authority if it's a city manager. In all of my cases, I always reported directly to a board, 5 or 7 elected board members. That was difficult to try to balance that process. But really working with the staff on a day in and day out basis was really a marriage. And it was a family. And you want to embrace a family. You want to give encouragement. Sometimes that's hard to do because things don't always go well. And you find yourself in the role of a disciplinarian. And when you do that, it must be in a constructive basis. It took a while to learn that. Trial and error methods. But that was probably the most difficult challenge. Always has been, always will be for most people.
So if you had advice for the new student entering the field as a professional, you're saying that probably one of the biggest challenges is as a supervisor or employer of people that are working for you.
Yes, you have to be a boss, a mentor, a coach, and those are different roles.
Right.
And you have to learn how to balance those, because when people look to you for decisions, your job is to try to educate them as they're doing their job, as you have been educated. You have a tendency to say, well, I can do that for you. That's not a learning experience for them. It's strategic questions that are thrown back, if you will. Have you considered this? Have you done that? How would you answer this question? And if they're not prepared for that, suggest that they get prepared before you come in for the final review.
Yeah.
So those are mentoring, those are coaching processes. Very difficult, but lots of fun.
It sounds
Lots of
like
fun.
what you would be advocating, and because you advocate this continuous learning process and everything, is, and you would look also for an agency that has some type of ongoing educational program for its employees.
Yes, I can tell you that there are many agencies who do not conduct staff development programs. Continuing education is generally the first thing cut in the budget. Those things were the last that we tried to cut because I put a premium on that. Growth in education is never ending. You think you have your job down pat, and then a curve comes, and you're ill prepared for that. So I don't believe you can stop preparing yourself once you have your 4-year degree. I was fortunate enough to do my master's and receive my master's in extension while I was working 55 to 60 hours a week. I was also going to school for 4 years to pick up my master's degree. Continuing education units in our certification, our national and state certification programs, all focus on the need for continuing education. That's either formal or informal, but it's important, and it's something that young students, young professionals must realize. It will never end. It should never end.
I'm going to segue back to John, because I know that we've talked one way about your relationship with your staff and your subordinates in the role that as a coach, as a mentor, and sometimes as a disciplinarian. But the other way is with the board and your relationship with the board and how you work, whether a board be a city council or a county commission or a park district board. Boards need to be worked with by executive directors, and maybe you can give us a little bit of your insight on that, and I'll let John go on with some additional questions.
Well, that's an excellent question. I have worked in Topeka. I worked for, I was, lower on the totem pole, if you will, but there was a board there. And I was fortunate enough to ask my boss, could I go to the board meetings? I don't think I missed a one. I rarely missed committee meetings. I wanted to learn. I was cutting my teeth and learning the profession, as both of you have. As I moved on then to Homewood Flossmoor and then to Elmhurst, I worked for elected boards, a 5-member board, 2 5-member boards in Homewood Flossmoor, and a 7-member board in Elmhurst. During all of that time, it's a common sense approach, I think. It has to be a business approach because you are running a business. You're running a corporation. You are the CEO of that corporation. The chairman of the corporation is the president of the board. And the cultivation of trying to communicate effectively with 5, 7, in some cases forest preserve districts in the Chicago area have 20-some people on a board. How you communicate with them, I don't know. Basically, they have committee structures, and it's not that hard. But the fact of the matter is, each of the board members looks to you for your guidance, if you will, and your recommendations. They come from every walk of life, and they hire you as the knowledgeable person who can bring information to them for their adjudication of decision making. You must treat each board member, while you may have primary role communication with the president of the board, you must communicate with all board members constantly. I went to a little update sheet, we called it, board member update sheet, that I printed out, worked on, staff members contributed, but it went to every board member. It gave them this is the status of some ongoing projects, because you're not able to feed all of them the same information at the same time. You have some board members, as you know, Bill and John, you certainly know this, they want to know what's going on and what time you mowed the grass. Other board members take a more laid-back business approach. I'll see you at the board meetings, keep me filled in. Certainly the no surprise rule is always in effect, and that is I don't ever want to be blindsided. Anything that's important that's going on, I expect you to contribute information before the fact to me. I found it a very invigorating process. It certainly can be challenging. I've worked with so many boards over the years, so many board members, and I've been on boards, the National Recreation and Park Association Board, the Illinois Park and Recreation Association, some other foundation boards, etc. So I've been on both sides of the table, and I found it to be extremely gratifying to make that contact and to communicate effectively with them.
Mick, when you were talking about your time in Topeka, you said that you asked the director if it was okay to go to board meetings. When you were then a director yourself, did you encourage your staff to attend board meetings, and how'd that work?
I wish some of the department heads and the supervisors were here. They, in a chorus, they would say yes.
Yeah.
I feel it's extremely important. Matter of fact, I won't get into any specifics, but I hired a department head from an agency, and that person said, would I be able to come to board meetings? And it took me by surprise. And I said, why do you ask that? Well, we weren't really allowed to go to board meetings in the agency that I left. And I said, well, you're going to get your fill of board meetings and committee meetings and advisory boards, et cetera, because that's the way we operate here. It's an open door policy. If a board member, if you're a staff member, John, and I'm a board member, somebody wants some information from you, I don't want them bothering the executive director all the time. If they have some need to know for information, go to the staff members for sure. Now there's a fine line on that, and I'm sure people who are listening to this, their eyebrows are going up. Oh no, I don't do that. I want to know what's going on because I don't want anybody saying some things that I'm not aware of. I'm not that insecure. I always said to board members, if you want to know something, call Chuck, call Steve, call Bill, do whatever you need to do to get the information. So I believe in that.
I can't imagine a better learning situation for a young person coming into this field than attending board and committee meetings, because
that's where the action is.
If you want to be a director, watch how a director operates.
That's right.
See what works, see what doesn't work. You're talking about a myriad of personalities. I mean, we know from experience how the dynamics of a board can change just by one member changing.
Absolutely.
And as a learning process, attendance at board meetings, I don't think can be beat. I mean, they ought to give CEUs for going to board meetings, because there's an awful lot to be learned there.
That's a good one, John. I'm chuckling, I laugh, and I'm buying what you say. I'll tell you some of the things that we used to do. On purpose, I would ask some of the staff members to make presentations, because this helped them develop. And they can make a presentation to the boss. You can work on a report, come into the boss's office, and have it out. Why did you choose this? There's nothing like the live action of a board meeting with people from the community, with the newspaper there taking down things, or the TV studio recording. You step up a level in your awareness and how you have to conduct yourself. It's an extremely good learning experience, one that we used to hold post-mortems after board meetings with the executive staff, generally the following morning, and talk about how we did, what we could have done to improve. And I would often ask the staff members, I didn't feel comfortable in this topic last night. You noticed that we were really struggling. I didn't feel I did my best in that discussion. How did you feel about it? Did you sense that? Because perhaps I was nervous. Perhaps I was caught short with lack of information, which often would happen when somebody asks you for some information that you don't have at your fingertips. So you become nervous, you're human. And we would try to role play and find out what went well and what didn't go so well, if you will, to build on that. and it helped. It helped me as the executive director, but it also helped the department heads.
As an executive director, does your relationship with the president of the board, although the president changes with various terms, differ from the relationship with the other board members?
Only in that there's more communication, day-to-day communication with the board president out of necessity. But as far as pecking order, no. All 5 board members or 7 board members have 1/7 or 1/5 of the voting power. Not to be diminished. All of them are important. They have run in the Illinois system. They're elected by the community. Their vote's important. Certainly you need, if you have a process where you have board rules and the board president says, I will be the spokesperson for the board, I will be the person that contacts the director and does the day-to-day business, keeps things moving and keeps the rest of the board informed. That's the personality and the dictate of the board, if you will. Many times, however, I would call all 5 to 7 board members in one day and talk about a particular issue. It does take time, but if that's the way they want to run things, that's the way you do it. And it depends upon the dynamics of the board at the time. They change, as you know, with personalities.
Which leads me to a naughty question. How did you deal with it when you had a loose cannon on the board? I mean,
Never had a loose cannon, John. No, there are, as we talked a moment ago, there are board members who are more, quote, into their job, if you will. And sometimes that can be lead to some difficulties, some communication difficulties. Sometimes it's necessary to call a timeout. And as you know, boards work on Open Meetings Act in most states, certainly in Illinois that's true. You can only go into closed session for a certain few topics. And personnel discussions is certainly one of those. And on occasion, I would go to the board president and say, look, I think there's some difficulties arising, there's some factions that are going on. I think we ought to have a meeting of the board and talk about some of these things. So you just set it forth in that perspective. Always keeping a very straightforward, honest, professional approach to it. Not choosing sides, not putting yourself into a lose situation, because the board realizes that you're in the middle. Some board members will want you to side with them, if you will, in a controversial issue. You have to play it down the middle. I found that's certainly the best policy, and try to live up to that at all times.
As a director or a professional, do you think that there's areas that this is really the board's responsibilities, and there's other areas that this is not where the board should be involved, and I as a professional staff and the professional staff should be handling this, and there's a line between the two?
Well, it's always been said, Bill, that the board sets the policy and the staff members help bring information to that. To be quite honest, I think anybody who has been in a situation where he or she has been an executive director reporting to the board realizes that the staff members often impact and sometimes create policy. True, at board meetings you don't vote, but certainly if you're not helping to create policy, I doubt whether you're doing your job. When it comes to the division, the lines, that will go by the board, by the dynamics of the board, the personalities that are involved. You have some very strong, forceful personalities that say, this is the way we're going to do it now, and these are your marching orders. That's fine. The worst thing is if the marching orders become very unclear or don't come down at all, and you think you need to take the lead and be aggressive in certain situations, and you get burned. That's a difficult situation that many find happen, but when that starts to become more than a random event, then I think again you need to call time out and say, I'm having some trouble here, can you help me? And the board will.
How much do you think the board should be involved in the actual selection of your professional staff?
I think the board's responsibility is to act as a conduit for the community to see that the best services are provided. I think, quite frankly, that the hiring of professional staff members should be left to the CEO. I feel very strongly about that. As a matter of fact, the last 2 jobs I interviewed for, Homewood Flossmoor and Elmhurst, That was about the second or third question out of about 30 that I had to ask the board, and that is that I wanted to know what their take was on that. Well, we have been used to letting the director hire the staff, but we want to review the department heads. And I said, well, I would only be comfortable if I were given the responsibility, because their actions are going to be my responsibility. If they perform or don't perform, then I'm on the line for that. And I want my team in there, if you will. And frankly, I've never worked in any way that I didn't have that opportunity, because you have to pick a team that's going to meld with your own management philosophies and personality. And I wanted the right, if you will, to do the job with the team that I chose. I feel very strongly about that. And frankly, I didn't find it to be a problem in, for about 28 years, I guess. I didn't have that luxury in the first job. I was a supervisor. But the other two jobs, I was the director.
We're running close to the end of our time here, Mick. There's a couple other things I'd like for you to comment on. One of them is the certification program for professionals, and what value or whatever do you see in that? And the other one is, how would you like to sum it up to young people that might watch this in any fashion you want about the career of Parks and Recreation, how to go about getting whatever you would like to comment on?
Sure. The first aspect, John, the aspect of certification, is really near and dear to my heart. I think in 1974, when I was president of the Illinois Park and Recreation Association, the concept of certification was sweeping the country. And I was asked to present the point in the point-counterpoint debate at a state conference about why our profession needed certification. And as you know, it still remains voluntary certification. I'm a staunch and ardent believer in that concept. I believe there's an amalgamation of education and experience that comes to bear in our profession and in any profession, and certification is a perpetrator of that, if you will. I believe in it so fervently that as soon as certification became an option, if you will, in our state and in our national organization, I went to the park board in Elmhurst at that time and said, I would like the board to adopt the policy as follows, and that we will not take fieldwork students from universities. And we were a big fieldwork consumer in the Elmhurst Park District setting. I will not take fieldwork students unless they are from an accredited university. And I was asked to come down to a meeting in mid-state a few months after that and explain my position to some of the department heads from some of the universities that weren't accredited, because I wanted students to come from a good accredited university and be certified. And that's one of the things we put in our job descriptions. Certification is desired, not mandated, but desired.
And of course, certification also involves continuing education.
Yes.
To maintain that certification. So,
which goes back to the CEU process, yes.
Okay, we've got about a minute left, so your last bit of advice.
Well, I guess I would say if you're looking for a dynamic profession, one in which you're able to bring personal philosophies about your concerns about the leisure industry to bear, if you want to try and develop a business process where you're running a business in a public agency, if you want to bring business skills, if you will, to the job, if you want to help people. A lot of people say, I'm a people person, I like to work with people. We all do to some degree, but you have to put that to technical use, and that means the amalgamation of good people skills and good business skills. If you're interested in that, and most of us are, the park and recreation profession is certainly one that will do you well.
Well, I want to thank you, Mick. This has been very informational. I think that students down the line are going to get quite a bit out of this. Once again, this has been one in the Legends series for the American Academy for Park and Recreation Administration. Thank you.